Lily Wilson.
Okay, thank you. All right. I am delighted to be here to talk to you all today, and I've also got to tell you I'm a little bit intimidated. I've been giving talks about my book around town, and this group is the most knowledgeable about history. So I stand ready to be corrected. Probably everyone in this room knows more about the history of Nashville than I do. I'm late to the party, but I'm learning as I go. And early on when I was writing this book, I remember saying to my sister, I wish I could talk about this at the history club before I finish the book because I know they're going to set me straight. But anyway, it's done, and here I am. So here's a picture of the Nativity scene. It was set up beside the Parthenon during the holiday season from 1953 through 1967. That's 15 years. We're going to tell a little bit about the background of it and the scene itself. This is a picture of me with the pigtails and my sister. I saw it as a child, and of course a child's perception of it is quite different than an adult's perception, and I've learned so much about it. The thing that made me want to learn more about it was, of course, I had memories of it, but every year around November, we start seeing all these rumors on social media about what happened to the nativity scene. People say it was made illegal, it was stolen. It's still in the basement of the Parthenon. I promise you it is not. I've been down there. So I decided I wanted to find out what happened to it. So I started researching, and the more I learned about it, the more interested I got. And finally I had a big pile, and I said, this is a book. So here we are. This is another picture of it at night. And as I have talked to more people who remember it, different people have told me, for example, one lady said, we lived in a little apartment right across West End from the nativity scene, and we had a roof we could sit out on, and we would sit there and we could see it. It was so brightly lit across West End. Another woman told me, you know the best place to view the nativity scene? And I said, no, where? And she said, Love Circle. Yeah. I said, when I was in high school, we used to go up there, but not to see the nativity scene. I said, that's where we went parking. And she said, well, I have to tell you, when a guy invited me to go up there to see it, I wondered what we were going to be doing. But that was before Love Circle was as developed as it is. There were smaller single-family homes that you could see over the roofs of, but I was still surprised that from that area you could see all the way down to the Parthenon. Of course, it was very, very brightly lit. Here's Fred Harvey. Fred Harvey was born in Canada. He came to the U.S. to go to college at Brown University, and soon after applied for citizenship and became a U.S. citizen. His lifelong dream had been to have his own department store. Years after he died, someone interviewed his wife, and she said, even before the store existed, it existed in his mind. So after he completed college, he had two goals: one, to get a lot of retail experience, and two, to save money to open his own store. So he moved around, worked at Marshall Field's, Lord & Taylor, in the big cities, Dallas, New York, Chicago, Detroit. He came to Nashville directly from Chicago. And when he came, he had his life savings of $35,000. And he used that to buy a failing department store called Denton's that had a 35-foot front on Church Street. And this was in 1942. The war was going on. The U.S. had just entered the war. Not a good time to open a department store. And he spent all his money purchasing the store, and in fact had to take a few small loans. So he didn't have money to put in new counters, do real fancy things, so he spent his money on paint in very bright colors. And those of you who remember Harvey's department store, it was like a carnival in a lot of ways. I mean, you could buy everything from automobile tires to underwear, but it was painted bright colors. It had a merry-go-round in the basement, a monorail around the ceiling kids could ride, fun house mirrors, people walking around dressed up like Disney characters, a guy on stilts. And Mr. Harvey was constantly trying to make his store more interesting, more fun, more appealing, and he encouraged people just to come to see what was happening, even if they didn't have money to spend. Here he is on one of his trademark carousel horses. These horses came from the carousel that used to be in Glendale Park, where there was a zoo and sort of entertainment center. That closed down during the Depression when they shut down the streetcar line that brought people to Glendale, and also the Depression. And the horses were removed from the carousel and put into storage. And a banker named Miller from Commerce Union was the one who gave Fred Harvey his loans, and he encouraged him to purchase these horses, which he did for $5 a piece. And they became the trademark of the store. He placed them throughout the store, and especially as a kid, I remember they'd be in between the up and down sides of the escalator. So as you rode up, you could look, and my sister and I would argue about which one was the best. The carousel he had in the basement was completely different, unrelated to these horses from Glendale Park. So Mr. Harvey said part of his goal was to revitalize downtown. He said Nashville needed waking up when he came, and he did. Even though the war was going on and it was difficult to get a lot of merchandise, he had some connections in New York, and he would drive up there, buy what he could, bring it back, and mark it up just enough to cover the cost of getting it and getting it back. For the first few years, he often worked 20 hours a day, paid himself $65 a week. He was just determined to make his store successful, and it was. And over the years, this picture of him on the horse is placed in one of the areas where they were knocking down the walls. His original 35-foot frontage on Church Street expanded to the whole block between 5th and 6th on Church Street. And this is a picture of him riding through one of those walls that's been knocked down for construction. One of his slogans was, "Harvey's is the store that will never know completion." And until he died in 1960, he was continually expanding new ideas, new ways to bring in entertainment. His grandson, Fred Harvey III, helped me a lot. I interviewed him repeatedly, and he shared family photos. And he frequently said, my grandfather was known as the Ringling Brothers of retail, because he was all about making it entertaining. And he would do things to make people talk about him, too, to start rumors, because he said they can't talk about me without saying the name of my store. So quite the character. Here's his trademark with the carousel horse. And the trademark script, I saw somebody come in over here. This gentleman has a hat with Harvey's on it. Yes. Now, is that from one of their current endeavors?
No, not at all. It's definitely a period piece.
Well, that is fantastic. As we go, if you all have questions, you can interrupt me, and I'm going to try to cut off 10 minutes before time's up for other questions. So, and if I say something that's flat out wrong, I want to hear that too. This is one of the postcards of the store. Let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger. This is, of course, after it had expanded a great deal. You can see it's taken up the whole block. And they're showing some of the different, and the horses by the escalator, some of the different places they had to eat. They had the Monkey Bar Cafe with the live monkeys in cages, which the health department might not go for now, but they did then. Here's a picture from 1957. Downtown, you can see the Christmas garlands and all the holiday shoppers in the rain. That corner store, that's Harvey's. And this is the escalator. The store had the first escalator in downtown Nashville. And it may have been the first in the Southeast. I tried to dig and see if Atlanta had something. I could not find another one, but you can see the store was absolutely packed for the ribbon cutting for the escalator. But before that, people used elevators. They had those old-timey ones with the brass gates that folded, and the elevator attendants, who I was in awe of as a child. I remember, they'd close the brass gate and push the numbers and announce the floor, and they wore white gloves. And I remember telling my mother I was going to do that when I grew up. It just seemed like such a fun thing. So the day that they opened the gates for this new escalator, Mr. Harvey, in typical form, put a sign beside it that said, "You must wear shoes to ride the escalator." He was just trying to have more hype. At that time, when people came downtown to shop, they dressed up in their Sunday clothes. So nobody was going to be barefoot. Here's the monkey bar. I'm sad to say I don't have a picture of the monkeys, but they were in this area in cages. And you could stop and have a milkshake, grab a hot dog while you shopped. This is one of his promotional things. Let me see if I can make this bigger so you can see it at the bottom. Mr. Harvey had Patsy Cline come to the store, Dinah Shore. Let's move that up. Harvey's welcomes Davy Fess Parker Crockett. And you can see they're bringing them in the back way, and they've got the news there. All right. Here we go. Here's Max Lowenstein. Max ran the carousel in the basement. Max was a survivor of Buchenwald. He not only endured some time in Buchenwald, but even after he was released from there and got to England, there was some mix-up, and they thought he was a parachute prisoner, and they put him on a boat to Australia, and it took him 2 years. In what he said, 120-degree heat some days. He spent 2 years there before they unsnarled things and sent him back to England. After the war, he came to the U.S., and he married another survivor, Gerda, here in the U.S., and when he went to Harvey's to apply for a job, the only thing they had open was Santa Claus. And they told him he was too slender, and he had a German accent. And he came right back at him and said, "They don't speak English at the North Pole. You don't know what Santa Claus sounds like." But they said, we're going to create a position for you in receiving. They didn't want him to be Santa. So he did that. And after a few years, Mr. Harvey asked him, would he be willing to run the merry-go-round in the basement? Did he think he could do 8 hours a day with small children and stay patient? And he did. And he was beloved to many children who went there to ride the merry-go-round. All right, so let's go back to Mr. Harvey's idea for the nativity scene. In 1951, Mr. Harvey was traveling in Europe. He saw a larger-than-life-size nativity scene. Different stories placed at different places. That's the thing. Just because something's in the paper doesn't mean it's true, and especially if it's a quote from Mr. Harvey, because he loved to embellish. But I checked several sources, and the thing I came up with most frequently, he saw this scene in Austria. So that's what I went with. And he immediately said he could see it arranged beside the Parthenon, and he wanted to give this to the people of Nashville. By then, his store was wildly successful. So he sent his treasurer a telegram saying, we're going to create this larger-than-life-size nativity scene, put some money aside, bills will be coming in. And his treasurer did. When the thing finally arrived, the first bill was $50,000. That treasurer had set aside $500. So he jumped up and ran into Mr. Harvey's office and said, "Is this legitimate?" And he said Mr. Harvey just gave him his little grin. So it was a much bigger project than anyone imagined. This gentleman in the picture here is Guido Rebecchini. He was the sculptor who made the figures. This is a picture of him as a young man. He was Italian. He and his 5 siblings and 2 parents immigrated to the U.S. in 1911. I found the Ellis Island papers where they came through, which is really exciting. Here he is with some of his non-nativity scene work. He worked at 2 other places before he came to work at the Silvestri Art Company, which is where he made the nativity scene. I found his grandkids who are also in the arts. There are 5 generations of sculptors in that family. Yeah, and they gave me these pictures of him with some of his other work. Here is a picture where he came from in Italy. It's between Genoa and Florence in the province of Lucca. He lived, before he came here, in a little town called Pietrasanta. And in this blow up, you can see I've marked 2 other little towns. One of those is where Mr. Silvestri's father came from, the guy who founded Silvestri Art Company, also in Chicago. And the other one is where the people came from who formed DePrado Art and Statuary, which is the first place Rebecchini worked when he came to the U.S. So this whole area of Italy backs up to some of the Carrara marble deposits, and many, many sculptors come from that area. Michelangelo marked on the high quality of the marble from there. I was really struck. First, I was researching Rebecchini, the sculptor, and his family, and then I looked at DePrado, the company he worked at first, and it's like, wow, it's near there. And then Mr. Silvestri's ancestors, and it's like these little towns are about 30 miles apart. But even now, if you put it in a GPS, how long does it take to get from Pietrasanta to Bagni di Lucca? Hours. So I'm guessing it's still little bitty roads, and back in 1911, people were not driving, walking or wagons, I guess. Here is some more of Mr. Rebecchini's artwork, and here he is. This is a terracotta. It was made for a facade of a building in Chicago, and this was before computers. He did all this by hand. The man was remarkably talented. This is his school medal. I found documentation, well, or at least a sentence, saying he went to school at the University of Florence. He went to school at the University of Rome. I asked his grandkids. They said, we don't know. They said, we do have his school medal, and sent me this picture of it, and it says basically School of Beauty and Art in Pietrasanta. So they know he went there, and they said he may have gone to those other schools too, but we just don't know. So there it is. Here's more of his terracotta work. This one says Midland Terracotta Company. That's the second place he worked after he came to the U.S. More of his work. He was known in later years for his nativity scenes ranging from very tiny to, there was one even bigger than the one he made for Nashville. This is Lincoln as a young man. He made this statue. And more of his religious art, which may have been from the DePrado Company. This is a statue in a cemetery that is still standing. When I was in Chicago researching it, I found it. The cemetery is on a Native American village site, and they wanted to mark it and acknowledge that that was what was there before. And it's still there. I had to look really hard to find it. Here's a close-up of it, a Native American on horseback. Here's Mr. Rebecchini working on one of the angels for the nativity scene, and that's Mr. Harvey there, posing with him. You can see how large she is. We'll talk about that in a minute. Those, aside from the palm trees, those standing angels that were holding the 6-foot trumpets, they were the biggest pieces. And here you can see Mr. Rebecchini is an older man by now. He was working at the Silvestri Art Manufacturing Company, and that company not only had the contract to decorate the streets of downtown Chicago at Christmas, and they made parade floats, but they were known far and wide for making little mechanical dolls for the department store windows. So I'm sure he did some of that too. So Mr. Harvey was in Chicago working at Lord & Taylor when Mr. Rebecchini was the head sculptor at Silvestri. And I don't know if he did business with them, but I'm sure he was aware that they were the ones doing the parade floats, the decorations in the downtown streets, and the department store windows. I read that people would line up, even in the Chicago winter cold, just to wait to see those department store windows unveiled. It was a big, big deal. And interestingly, Fred Harvey III said to me, speaking of Harveys in Nashville, at Christmas, the display windows were a big, big, big deal. And I said, yeah, I get it. All right, Scholastic. This is what our nativity scene was made of. And it's what many of the Muppets were made of, too. It's a very lightweight material. The way you work with it is you make a wire form. Say, if you wanted the Virgin Mary, you make a wire form. Then you drape cloth over it. And then you use some very toxic solvents to infuse this with latex rubber. And it makes a very lightweight piece that can be moved around. You can cut it with a knife. And if it's not how you want it, you can reheat it and remold it. And they thought this was a great choice for an outdoor nativity scene because it had latex rubber in it and thought it would be weatherproof. It was not, but we'll get to that. All right, so this is one of the earliest years. You can see it's sort of streamlined and elegant. What I did not realize as a child was that each year they were adding new pieces to it. To me, it just, well, I didn't go to it until the 60s. To me, it just always seemed huge and magical. But there were people with a little more awareness who were eager to see each year, what's he going to add to it? So the first year it had roughly 30 pieces. Mary, Joseph, the baby Jesus. These are 2 shepherds kneeling, some angels, some animals, and here you can see one of the wise men coming in on a camel. So about 30 pieces. By the time it ended its run in Nashville, it had 123 pieces. And that's not counting those arches over the manger and those trees in the background. I'm talking actual sculptures. So it grew and grew and grew. This is the Parthenon, and everything I read said it was as long as the long side of the Parthenon. Well, it was actually longer. We'll see another picture later. You can see it starts like out here, runs the whole length, and then continues on. Maybe the first year it was the same length, but it got bigger and bigger. This is a tunnel under the perimeter of the Parthenon. This is where they stored the nativity scene in the early years. And I was fortunate to be given a tour, which is how I know that it's not being stored down there now. It's a pretty narrow tunnel, and as you can see, they still use it for storage. I had read that there was a small door from this tunnel to the outside, which was how they got the pieces out at the end of the time of storage when they needed to start setting up the scene. And I asked the guy giving me the tour, can I see that little door? And he said, oh, we don't use that. It's been locked up and nailed shut for a long time, and we've got insulation over it. And I said, oh, well, can I see where it was? And anyway, he pulled the insulation down for me, so I got to see it. You can see there, it's a narrow little door. It's not even 3 feet wide. So some of the materials I read said that each year when they took the nativity scene out to get it ready to show again, it had to be repaired. And I'm guessing some of that damage happened when they were trying to get it out that little bitty door. This is another picture. This is 56. It's still pretty elegant and streamlined when you compare it to how it was later. Here you can see some of the spectators in front and the tree branches behind it with the little white lights. Every year at Labor Day, Mr. Harvey would send some of the workers from his store to the Smoky Mountains to cut down 30 hackberry saplings, all the same size, to use as a backdrop. The Smoky Mountains is a national park. It's illegal to cut down trees in a national park. That law was on the books then, but I'm guessing it wasn't enforced, and I'm guessing Mr. Harvey didn't know anything about it. Later, someone who lived closer into town said, we've got land with woods, you're welcome to come cut these here, so they stopped going to the Smoky Mountains for their trees. But they would bring these back, and the workmen would spray paint them silver and white to be in the background. These are some of the animals. Mr. Harvey loved, when the nativity scene was being displayed, he loved to circulate through the crowd and eavesdrop what people were saying. And he noticed that a lot of the children liked the baby animals. So one year for the expansion, he added 18 baby animals, the calves, lambs, baby donkeys, and there was a dog in it somewhere. I think he may have added a puppy that year too. So children, and he was right. When he went through and the new ones were up, kids were thrilled. Here you can see the kneeling angels approaching the manger. They weren't there the first year. Those were a later addition. Before those angels, they had some little choir boy type figures with choir robes on that didn't really look like they came from the time of Christ. And they were holding songbooks. And a few years later, they decided those choir boys looked too modern. So they took away their songbooks and gave them candles and kind of moved them to the back and brought the kneeling angels up around the front. Apparently, they gave a lot of thought to how this would change each year. Here you can see more just the brightness of it, how it was really lit up. And here I want to bring your attention to those trees in the back that have the little white lights. At the time they had this up, most people who decorated, whether indoors or outdoors, were using those Christmas lights that are about as big as your thumb, and they were in primary colors. Nobody had the little bitty white lights. Mr. Silvestri, who owned Silvestri Art Manufacturing in Chicago, where this was made, frequently went back to Italy for ideas and merchandise. And while he was there once, he saw some of these little white lights and he was thrilled. So he bought a bunch and brought them back. And at his company, to a person, everyone just went, nope, we're not using those. The wiring is flimsy and cheap, and no way it will stand up to the Chicago winters. So he went back to Italy and found that these were being made by the inmates in Italian prisons. So he really couldn't get in there and do quality control. So he started his own company in Italy to make these lights with much sturdier wiring that would stand up to Chicago winters. And he imported lots and lots. His company used them for scenes like our Nativity scene that they were commissioned for, and they also sold them in department stores. And he bought so many that the Italian government gave him an award for stimulating commerce. And they did add a lot, making that sparkly backdrop. Here it is. You can see how it's longer than the Parthenon on both sides. And those palm trees, which to me as a child, those were quite remarkable. And when I talk to other people who saw it as children and say, what do you remember about it? That's what they usually say, the palm trees. And I can remember asking my mother, is that what the trees look like where Jesus lived? And she said, yes, it is. So I don't think she was ready for an in-depth discussion. But she said, it was a desert where Jesus lived. And I'm like, right, is that where palm trees grow? I hope so. Here you can see the Holy Family more. Can I move that? Nope. Mary has a halo. Jesus has a halo too, but you can't see his as well. And you can, again, see those little bright lights. This is 56. It was only 3 years old at that time. These are some of the guys who helped set it up with the fire truck and their extension ladder that were needed in later years when it got bigger and bigger and bigger. In 1960, they added some standing angels, and all the figures in the scene were placed on 2-foot pedestals just to make it easier to see them as you got further back. So these angels were 12 feet tall. They put them on 2-foot pedestals, making them 14. And then they gave them the trumpets they were holding up that were 6 feet, so they were 20 feet tall. They had to have guy wires anchoring them. They were very lightweight because they were made of celastic, but bad wind, snow, rain, other things could knock them over. And we have some other pictures where you can see the guy wires better. Here, let's make this bigger. Here's a guy unloading some of the pieces. And you can see he's got this donkey on his shoulders. If that was plaster, it would take several people to carry it, but it was very lightweight. And they've got the kneeling angels on their pedestals there. These pieces, as a kid, I always thought were white. Another thing I learned, they weren't solid white. They painted the areas that would be shaded with light blue just to give it more depth when it was lighted. I never saw it during the day to observe that as a child. So I've learned so much about it. Here's Mr. Harvey with some of his workers unloading a camel and putting a wise man on it, and these little kids are enjoying this donkey. This was the first year, so it was a big, big deal. Here's one of the workmen spraying those tree branches for the background. Mr. Harvey said that, you can see it down here, more than 400 gallons of paint are used annually to dress up trees, branches, and more than 200 units used in the dazzling display. That may be accurate. It may be just a number he pulled out of the sky, which his grandson said, My grandfather was a great man, but he never let the truth ruin a good story. So, I tried to factor this in whenever I'm taking direct quotes from Fred Harvey that he wanted to make things big. Like after the store had been here 2 years, he printed something in the newspaper that said, I think he said the 1,732 employees of Harvey's wish the people of Nashville Merry Christmas. At the time, 800 people were employed at the store. So he loved a good exaggeration. Here's Mr. Harvey with some of the kneeling angels. As a child, I thought their wings looked like ears, because curved up, giant ears. Here are some of the spectators basking in the glow. The thing was so brightly lit. And here's another one. I love this picture. You can see real faintly a palm tree back here, but basically you can't tell what it is, but it's something amazing that's covering these people in light, and they're all in awe. You can also see the boardwalk here that they're standing on. The first year they opened it, there was no boardwalk, and within a few days there was a big mud hole in front of it. So Mr. Harvey had some of his employees from the store, the carpentry department, come out and throw together a boardwalk, and many years they expanded it just because more and more people were coming, and by the time it was the final year, 16 feet wide. I want to make this bigger so you can see the little sign. This little sign, which was, I read, so if what I read is accurate, the sign itself was just about 1 foot tall, the white part. It says the Nativity pageant, donated in 1953 by Fred Harvey to the city of Nashville for the enjoyment of all the people. There were people who saw this, it was over to the side, and felt that Harvey was trying to capitalize on Christmas, and it gave them a very negative impression. Although it seems a little bit strange since his store was downtown, miles away. It wasn't as if people would come see the nativity scene and then right next door go shopping. My impression from reading about him and from interviewing people, including his grandson, was that he really wanted to give something big and beautiful to the people of Nashville. And he did. And some people who were Christians came to see it, and it was, it was part of their, for some people, it was actually a worship experience. People who were not Christian also enjoyed it. I interviewed one Jewish woman who said, "Oh, we didn't associate it with the birth of Christ. We just thought it was a lovely holiday decoration. And as a child, I thought it was made of ice." So, and my mother had a friend from Japan who went to see it and said it was lovely and asked if Christianity was our national religion. And my mother said, "No, we don't have a national religion. Everyone gets to pick their own." But, and here where it says all the people, I would like to point out at the time we got the nativity scene, Nashville was still segregated. While we still had it, the Civil Rights Act was put into place and things started to change. But as we all know, the change was not immediate, it was not necessarily smooth, and it was not overnight. And early on, if people of color wanted to come see this, they most often stayed in their cars because they felt safer there, which is unfortunate. One of the people I interviewed, Howard Gentry, lived nearby and said that he is black, used to ride his bike through the park as fast as he could. He wasn't supposed to be there, but it was just sort of an act of defiance, and he'd be so fast that by the time someone came out to yell at him, he'd be gone. He said once the Civil Rights Act was enacted, his whole family would walk from their home. Before, they would just drive in the car and drive the loop and look at it. They'd park the car, they would walk across the boardwalk, and he said to him, just being able to do that was a much bigger deal than any other aspect of it. It was like, I get to join the people of Nashville in observing Christmas. So I feel lucky I got to talk to him. Here's the same guy spray painting the trees. Here's one of those angels with the 6-foot trumpet. I have another one that's full length with humans beside her, so you can see the scale. It was just enormous. This is an aerial view of it. It looks almost like, little toys. People used to have those barnyard sets with the little plastic animals. It looks like that's what you're looking at when you look down on it. One person I spoke to claimed to have which I read, specially prepared cloth that went under it, which they marked, put the manger here, put a wise man here. I tried to follow up and get to actually see that, but it didn't. I don't know if they don't still have it or what, but I didn't get to see it. But it was interesting to hear that there was a big cloth that they rolled out. And I guess when they added pieces and moved things around, I don't know if they got a new cloth or just, no longer put the wise man here. Changed it as they went. This is a daylight view of it. I don't know why they keep getting small again. You can see it looks completely different without all those bright lights on it. Still very pretty. After the first few years with the white lights on it, they added some color lights. Some of you all may remember when it was popular to have those aluminum Christmas trees, and they put the rotating colored lights so it's red, and then it's green, and then it's yellow. They put those on it. And as a kid, I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. My mother, not so much. I remember her I prefer white. And as an adult, I think I would think it was a little bit weird to see the whole thing bathed in bright red. But as a child, I thought it was gorgeous. Here's a picture. You can see the boardwalk's all wet in the rain. The nativity scene got rained on and snowed on a lot. This is Fred Harvey Jr., or also known as Rick. And some of you may have known him. I talked to somebody before we started who said that he went to West End High School with Rick. Fred Harvey Sr. died in 1960, and by this time Rick was an adult, and he took over both running the department store and managing the nativity scene. He continued to go to Chicago and talk to the sculptor and make plans for what additions would be made each year. Here we are. Look how little the humans are next to this angel. Yeah, that was, at the time, it was said to be the largest nativity set in the world. And I think that was a lot of what made it have such an impact. Well, part of it was just the dazzling lighting, but these figures were so huge. It was really unlikely you would see it and not be awed by it because they were so much larger than we were as people. Here we have more spectators. And here is the only color picture I have of it. You can see it looks a little bit different with I guess this is when the blue lights hit it. You can see the angels look blue here and the palm trees look blue. Gives it quite a different look. This is a painting of it. Elaine Speed Neely grew up in Nashville, enjoyed seeing the nativity scene. In fact, told me she had this ritual where they would go downtown, do their Christmas shopping, have hot chocolate at Harvey's Monkey Bar, and then come back and see the nativity scene on their way home when it got dark. So she grew up to be an artist, married a man who was not from Nashville, and moved to Memphis. And in the 80s, after the nativity scene was long gone, she decided she wanted to paint it. So she came back to Nashville, spoke with Fred Harvey Jr., or Rick, and he gave her pictures to use, and she painted this very good likeness of it. Some of you all probably own it. And she said, we tell this story in fun, but when she first painted it, she was quite pleased, and she said to her husband, maybe we should have prints of this made. And he said, honey, it's a nice painting, but I don't think so. So she just let that go by, and about a month later, they were coming to Nashville for an art show, and she put this painting in, and when they got to Nashville, she was setting up her booth, and her husband took the nativity scene painting and went around to print shops, and the first guy he asked said, it's a nice painting, but I wouldn't waste any money on prints. So he went somewhere else, and the next guy was Jewish and not aware that this tradition had happened decades before, and said, nice, but don't put any more money into it. And the third guy was quite young and knew nothing about it and said basically the same thing, forget it. So quite sure that he was right, her husband took the painting back to the art show and she set it up. And when they opened, she said people just flooded into her booth. Everybody wanted to buy it, wanted to buy a print, wanted to tell her their memories of the nativity scene. So by the end of the day, her husband took the painting, went back to the print shop and arranged to have them printed. For a long time, these have sold in the Parthenon gift shop. They have big ones, medium, and small. Right now, there are none. This may be because they're working on the HVAC and they're trying to move some of the merchandise out of the gift shop and have fewer items in there. And I'm very grateful that they're leaving my book. But when I talked to Elaine Speed, Neely, she said every time she comes to Nashville, she brings some more to the Parthenon gift shop. So maybe they will have them again. I don't know that, but that's my guess. Here's a picture of it in the snow. This is dated 1960. At that point, you can see how weighed down that palm tree is with snow. And the woman on the burro, which some people said represented Mary, it did not. Mr. Harvey, on one of his trips back to Europe, said that he saw a lot of their nativity scenes had a group of women on burros approaching the manger from the opposite side where the wise men were coming, and that they looked like humble peasants coming to worship Jesus, and that it was a nice contrast to the wise men, who were wealthy and had all these jewels. So Mr. Harvey added 3 or 4 women on burros to his nativity scene one year. So anyway, 1960 it got snowed on. 1966 and 67, at least twice, it took a hit of 7 inches of snow. The fabric in these pieces wicked up water like a sponge. In a few years, they got put away wet. So they began to rot from the inside out. When they took them out to get ready, some of them absolutely fell apart. A few pieces were replaced, and they would try to repair what they could and repaint. And I read that they sent a few pieces to be, quote, fiberglassed. I never could find where or how or which pieces, I don't know. So they did really try to keep it going, but 66 and 67 with those massive snows, that was pretty much the beginning of the end for it. I'm going to zoom in on this Holy Family here. You can see them a little bit better. They have 2 shepherds here, and they've got the whole family on a little platform together. That's another daylight view of it up above. And this mentions the Christmas music. On opening night, they would often have choirs from Vanderbilt and Belmont and what was Peabody at the time stand on the steps of the Parthenon and sing. And later in the season, they would pipe in Christmas carols. So music was a big part of it, as well as the lighting. Here's that angel again. This is just a picture of a college woman. Many of the people I interviewed who were at high school or college age said to me, this was the place to go to see and be seen. You wanted to have a date take you to the nativity scene. And I even met one woman who got engaged there. So that was fun. And the guy who gave me the tour of the Parthenon said he had talked to one of the guys who did security. They had a guy just stand by it to make sure nobody vandalized it, who said that during one of the snows, a young man had come prepared to propose to his fiancée, and he dropped the ring in the snow and spent the whole evening just digging through the snow. I don't know if he ever found it, but I tried to track down that person to get more of the story, but unsuccessfully. Here it is, soaked in snow again. You can see, I think this is a sheep, but it's really hard to tell with that much snow on it. It definitely gave it a different look. And if they had known it was damaging it, they might have gotten out there and tried to brush it off, but that's what we got. Here's Mr. Harvey with the choir boys. It's kind of hard to see them. There's not a lot of contrast, but before they got moved to the back. And this is one of my just bigger pictures of the whole thing. So what happened to it? In 1967, it got snowed on, they put it away, and around Labor Day in 68, when they took it out, it was a mess. Pieces were falling apart. They felt that it wouldn't be safe with these giant palm trees and those 20-foot angels. Even with guy wires, they really felt like it could be dangerous and it could be a liability. Mr. Harvey Jr., offered it to the city of Nashville just to give it to them. But, basically you all take on storage, maintenance, repainting, repair. And they considered it and then said they couldn't afford it. So he sold it to an advertising company in Cincinnati. For 2 years, this company displayed it indoors in a mall in Cincinnati. The scene is really too big to be indoors. And although 2 or 3 pieces had disintegrated to the point where they didn't sell them, they just discarded them when they sold it. So it only had, I think, 119 when they sold it. But they crammed it into the mall. I found one picture. It was not a hit in Cincinnati. Even if they'd had space to set it up like they wanted, there wouldn't have been adequate distance for people to get back to have a good perspective. So it was not well received. And I have a friend who grew up in Cincinnati, and she did not see it in the mall. But when I told her about this, she said, my guess is it's because we at the time already had 2, not as big as this, but good-sized outdoor nativity scenes, and that they were our tradition. And I think people just were like, no, we've already got our nativity scene. We don't want that. And I found one photograph of it in the newspaper, and it really appeared that it was taken to show it at its absolute worst. They took the picture from the side, from the very end. You can't see the Holy Family. You just see this jumble of white statues. You can't tell what it is. And in the foreground is the rear end of a dog. So it was not a hit in Cincinnati. And I went up there, dug around in their libraries, newspapers, asked everybody who I could find. They said after 2 years it was in such a state of disrepair that it, quote, had to be discarded. I looked and looked, I asked questions. Does discarded mean they sold it? They took it all to the dump? I don't know. I hit a dead end there, which was quite a disappointment to me. So Nashville no longer had it. A lot of people were crestfallen. People had come from all 50 states, from other countries. AAA even mentioned it in their book of things to see in Nashville. While we had it, those 15 years, it was a really special time. A lot of people like to look back and say it was, simpler times, better times. Maybe yes, maybe no. We didn't have social media, so everything wasn't talked about. But we had the Vietnam War. We had the Bay of Pigs. We had all the communist scares. President Kennedy was telling people to build bomb shelters. We had enough going on then. And I think the nativity scene was, it was a welcome escape. Here is something that's beautiful. Here is something that's peaceful. You can push the rest of your life aside and just come, be quiet, and enjoy it. So those of us who lived through it and got to see it were very, very fortunate. And that's part of why I wanted to write the book, because while all this information was available, it wasn't all available in one place. And I wanted to pull it together and put it all where it will be remembered, because we're not all going to live forever, and at some point there won't be anybody alive who remembers seeing it. Anyhow, so we have a few minutes if people have questions, or if you have memories of it you want to share, I would love to hear those. Yes?
Well, first of all, I want to say your research is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I'm really impressed. How long did it take?
Well, I didn't just start this and stick with it. I was working on a number of other projects. So I have probably done it over 5 years.
Here's the book I bought at Belmont Mansion.
Thank you. Yeah. I had hoped to bring books with me today, but I didn't.
It's available at Belmont Mansion, right?
Right, it is at the Belmont Mansion gift shop, at the Parthenon gift shop, Ellington Soda shop. I've had trouble getting enough copies myself. Let's just say I'm naive to publishing and learning my way around, and retail and all that, blah, blah. But this group is having an event at the Wessex next week, and if I have books by then, I'm willing to bring them, and I'm willing to sell them to you all more cheaply than the cover price too, because we won't be paying a retailer. So, books are available, but they're not easy to find in stores. Yes.
I came in late, I apologize. I walked through this exhibit when I was like 7 years old, and I remember that it was very quiet. People walked through, it was almost like a sacred thing. They didn't have, I don't remember music. Do you have access to the color film of the collection?
I have not. I didn't even know that existed.
It does. There is a color film, and I'll see if I can find it for you.
Okay, thanks. I'd love to see that. Yes,
What about the Phil Ponder painting or prints?
he painted pictures of this?
Yeah, I have
Do you?
one.
Okay. All right, I'm ignorant. That's fantastic. And are they available for purchase anymore? Yeah, where can you buy those?
His daughter runs a gift frame shop. Not Julia, that one
Okay, well, that's good to know. So if you can't get Elaine Speed Neely's painting, Phil Ponder has a painting of it too. That's great. Anybody else remember? Yes.
I live down off Caldwell Lane at Glendale Elementary School, home of the Glendale Ponies. And it's on the site of Glendale Park, and they have one of the carousel ponies in the front, in the lobby of the school. And I'm sure you can see it anytime through the window, but I'm positive if you're interested, anyone's interested in seeing it sometime, go during school hours, and it's right there in the lobby. But
Yeah.
it was interesting, very interesting to me to see the pony that Fred Harvey was on and hear the story. Oh, you have the carousel at the park and the downtown ponies, and those are different. Because when I seeing that photograph, I thought, that's not one of those ponies. But it's not one of the park ponies, which are much more delicate, I guess I'll just say, smaller. But in any case, I just had to point it out.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and Fred Harvey III, the one that I interviewed who helped me so much, still has some of those horses too. I got to see him when I went out to his house to interview him. So memories continue. Anybody else remember or want to share your memories?
You know how much they sold the food in Cincinnati?
Sold what?
Do you know how much you got when he sold it to Cincinnati?
I do not. People asked him, and for newspaper articles, he answered a pittance. People have asked me over the years, do you have a ballpark for how much money the Harveys sunk into this scene? Someone asked Rick, Fred Harvey Jr., about that after his father was gone. And this is not including the electrical bills to light it at night, which he said were astronomical, but just the scene itself, the repair, the maintenance. He said $250,000, which to us is not that much, but when you put it in an inflation calculator today, that would be $2.4 million. In the early 50s, you could buy a house in Nashville, depending on the house, $4,000 to $8,000. So spending $50,000 just to get this thing going was huge. Yes.
Boy, I was 8 years old when my mother and I moved here
Uh-huh.
in 1953.
Oh.
So this is one of the first big events that I witnessed as a Nashvilleian. We didn't live far from Centennial Park. We had
Uh-huh.
an apartment near St. Thomas Hospital. And I remember my mother taking me to it, and how many cars.
Yes.
There was so much congestion.
Yes.
It was really a big event for Nashville.
It was. One of the articles I read said that the long line of cars slowly moving into the park with their lights on, that they felt like that was almost part of the display, this slowly moving line of lit up cars. And I talked to one woman who told me she was fairly young, married, had 5 kids under the age of 5, and she said she and her husband had no money, barely made rent every month. And every Christmas season, they would put all their kids in the car, and several times a week come drive the loop through the Parthenon. Because it was free and it was beautiful and the kids loved it. There were no seat belts, and she said they would run from one side of the car to the other. And she said, you know, for my kids, that was our holiday celebration, and it was free, which was, Mr. Harvey was wealthy by the time he died, but he knew everybody didn't have the resources he did. And he really gave this just so people could enjoy it. There was no money attached to come see it. You know, you just show up and see it and leave when you're ready. Yes?
Yeah, I remember my family, parents were from this area, but after the war and they married, they moved to the Midwest. And when I was a child growing up, we would always come back at Christmas time to visit relatives who had remained here, but we never missed going to see the nativity scene. That was always part of the tradition of our return home at Christmas. And I remember as a child, and just like you, just go and we'd stand there and look at it. It's awesome. I would think of both kind of aesthetically, but also spiritually. I don't know, care what faith you had, just with the mix of the Parthenon and the sky, and then those figures, it just really made this permanent impression on me.
And that is a good point, that it wasn't just for Christians. In fact, the artist, Elaine Neely Smith, said to me, "Oh, we do it all in Nashville. We have a Christian scene in front of a pagan temple here." But, yes.
In the 90s, I rented part of the old German factory at the corner of 5th and Main, and the German guy was giving me the tour, and we walked by, and what he told me was the Harvey's nativity scene stored in the old German factory at the corner of 5th and Main. Now, I don't know if that was the case, and I don't think the figures were as large as we've seen, but maybe they had some of the smaller ones.
Yeah, I really don't know. I think it's quite possible that when it was packed up to ship to Cincinnati, they maybe pulled out a few things that weren't in very good shape, or that they just weren't ready to let go of. You know, there will always be little pieces of history that are undocumented, but that's interesting that was there in the 90s.
Since you have, I have found the film.
Oh, cool.
And I think since everybody's here to see this,
Uh-huh.
I think, what is your email address? And I'll send you, and maybe you can project it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Let me show you what, it's Scenes of Nashville, okay? This is,
Okay.
this is what you,
Oh, I have seen that.
that's the color version.
Okay, well, let's put it up here so people might. Okay, we're gonna, he's very quickly and amazingly found that film, which I have seen it, but you all might want to see it, and we're gonna put the address up here on the screen so you can see the web address and look it up when you go home.
Music and colored lights, these beautiful classic statues of the Nativity of the Angel.
This was something that was on Reading 52.
Oh, I'm not plugged into the system here. I don't have internet.
Go to, I guess it would go to your,
Yeah, I'm not. Can you just tell me what they should search on YouTube to see that?
yes, okay, let's do that. First I'll try to-
Okay. I'm not on the internet here, so I can't post it, but he's going to tell you. If you want to see this film about it that actually has some color, you can go to YouTube and type in what?
YouTube, it's Harvey's Nativity Scene, and it was made by Nashville Public Television.
Okay.
Memories of Nashville.
Memories of Nashville.
Nashville was a show that they had. It's like 3 minutes, and I'm watching it now, and it shows Fred Harvey in the snow, and then it shows.
Great.
I mean, it's,
All right, so that is well worth going to YouTube to look for that. You can start with Nashville Nativity Scene and then Memories of Nashville. You should be able to pull it up. Okay, if nobody else has a question or comment, that's it. Do you, Jean, do you want to say anything? Thank you.